Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll do a little introduction while people are filtering in and out. My name's Sam Kessler. I'm a journalist here at CoinDesk, and I'm really excited to be joined here by Evan Cheng from Sui, which is a blockchain that doubtless all of you here at this panel have heard about. We're going to talk about a bunch. We don't have a ton of time, so I kind of just want to jump into it. Well, first off, Evan, thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be here.
Thanks for coming to Hong Kong. You said it was your first time. It's a far way to travel from San Francisco, so I really appreciate it. So, in the lead up to this panel, I was talking to Evan and his team about, what are the sorts of things that we can cover, and they referred me to an article that you wrote recently. You shared it on Twitter, X, and it was about can't be evil technology. The idea of building infrastructure that can't be evil, obviously, stemming from Google's "Don't Be Evil" moniker. Tell me a little bit about that and kind of how Sui, what it is and how that works into that whole thesis.
I mean, it's a recognition of what the current Web2 business model. We were seeing the bigger gets bigger, and the way they get bigger because they're essentially gatekeeper. They're handling customer data, customer assets, customer secrets, and sort of becomes the gatekeeper, and the network effect take hold. And the monetization model is always like somehow extracting the value from the customer, and you have to trust it, right? Yeah. So this comes down to trust.
Yeah.
So but taking a step back, right? That just feels wrong, right?
Yeah.
This is not what internet was about from the very beginning. It's about evening the playing field. How do we come here? It turns out it is really, really hard to build products and services that sort of like not try to extract value and not try to leverage the power of, having that hoard of information, the data, and so it's leading us to that point, and frankly, this is the opportunity for these industries, building the kind of tools and infrastructure to allow business transformation to go away from that business model.
Now, a core part of that article and that idea, vision that you laid out, wasn't just about how crypto is, of course, a solution to this don't be evil, can't be evil sort of dichotomy, but Sui in particular, and maybe in contrast to other crypto firms in your view, or blockchains, is better poised, of course, your opinion, what you're building, to actually build that kind of can't be evil technology. So what differentiates, Sui and other blockchains like it from, maybe you can name names, these can be evil blockchains that are still trying to solve the same problem?
So it comes down to ultimately where do you place the trust, and if the blockchain is not built correctly, we're seeing examples of other blockchains that fall back to a centralized solution. Let's, we can talk about Sui all day. I can talk about Sui all day.
We've got 16 minutes.
And so frankly, right, it comes down to the enforcement of rules that's defined by the creator of the asset. And the job of the blockchain is to help basically ensuring those rules are followed without the opportunity for human to come along and circumvent those rules, right? So the example I always use, right, is back in 2021, and everybody is trading NFTs, and the premises was good, where you can create an art and wrap in NFT, you sell to someone, and that person turns around, sell to someone else, and that royalty payment will somehow come back to the creator. Yeah. That seems like a perfect example of can be evil, except that's exactly what happened is the marketplace stopped dropping the enforcement of this royalty payments.
Yes.
And why is that? Because the model is wrong. Right? Yeah. You're not building it correctly where the rule enforcement cannot be circumvented, right? Yeah. So at the highest level, right, at the more general level, that is the fundamental difference is Sui built that way is you cannot do that, right? This is what I mean by
mechanically.
Mechanically, right. So each object is essentially its own its asset is its own object.
So this is the Move programming language.
Well, this is not just Move programming language, right? People confuse platform and the programming language. Programming language can be used for a different platform.
Sure.
It's a data model. It's how you.
It's object oriented.
How you represent asset, right? In the account-based model, you're basically saying the information about the assets are living inside a smart contract, and each asset you can kind of, sort of connect some other stage to it, but it's all in a fairly clumsy way. If you ever, kind of spend any time building developer tools and programming language, you know that feels wrong. You have to have the encapsulation, and the rules have to be encoded in a way where the implementation cannot, it forces you to literally say, if you're not Sam, you cannot pick this up. Yeah. And I just pick it up, that rules enforcement is not there, right? So it's a lot of like the data modeling. It's the unit of computation. Everything has to be built correctly. So we went away from, we saw this, and we went away from that account-based model. It's a lot of, I wish I have a whiteboard to go draw why that cannot be the case, but generally speaking, in the probably people familiar with the NFT model, ERC 721, you're not really encoding any rules there. You're just saying, if you follow interface, you follow the standard, but the enforcement is in the code. Yeah. It's not in the, what it look like. Yeah.
So you mentioned there's a difference, of course, between platforms and the language move. We've kind of brushed over this, but one of Sui's claims to fame is it was one of the first blockchain ecosystems to really implement Facebook's DM Libra programming language move. It's a blockchain programming language. You were at Facebook previously. You worked on this project. It was ill-fated at Facebook, but of course it came to life with Sui and other blockchains, Aptos and Movement, which is a layer 2 on Ethereum. Bearing in mind that difference between platforms and languages, can you kind of talk to me about the difference between Sui and these other, two and maybe others implementations of Move's programming language?
Well, as I say, right, the object-based model where every asset is its own object, right? The states are capturing the object.
And that differentiates
that's
Sui
a huge
from
difference.
Aptos and Movement.
Right. So it's not a account-based model blockchain. And one thing I'm just going to talk about in a little bit more detail, just to give you a sense. Right? So if the information about the asset does not live on chain, you literally cannot enforce rules around the state.
Sure.
Right. So we just say, capture this example. This is Sam's bottle of water, and that bottle and that information has to be on chain for the rules to take place. Right.
Yeah.
But most other blockchain cannot store much information on chain. Right. You heard about this. You've seen the NFT standard of most of these blockchains, right? They live off chain, right? You encode a URL where the actual assets are living elsewhere. Yeah. Why is that? Why is the storage so expensive? Because the way you organize information, organize data is fundamentally incorrect, right? So you're forced to keep this information in a very, very expensive data structure, authenticated data structure. So it costs the on-chain storage to be really, really high to the point where you really cannot store any information there. So if you can't do that, there's a lot of limitation you cannot. Right. So this is why, I mean, just like any other platforms out there, outside of kind of the crypto ecosystem, a lot of times the programming languages share across lots of different platforms. But the way you program it, where you describe logic, encode logics are very, very different.
Now, is that a positive for your ecosystem that you have these competitors, community members? I don't know. How do you kind of view these other chains?
Well, so a lot of these chains come out roughly the same time.
Yeah.
And why is the Sui much, much more popular than other? We have a point of view, right? And we have a point of view. We justify our point of view by describing the problem we're trying to solve and how we're solving it. And it turns out developers love it. They talk about the developer efficiency, the experience, and they can build much more efficient product. The products are more interesting. They're more real on-chain composability, right? If you ever look at, for example, some of these aggregator trading bots and all that, you see a program transaction block that touch 10 different protocols to try to get the best price or arbitraging across lots of different protocols. People have been talking about, composability for a long time, but it's real on Sui. It's not really real elsewhere. And we can even talk about data composability. Even our NFT projects, some of them, that you see the changes as things happen to the object. So these things cannot be done on other platform. Or they have to fall back to a very centralized solution. The off-chain storage was the indexer telling you what the content actually look like. Those are the wrong technology. So this is why we took off while most others have not in this cycle. And it's because we have a very opinionated approach to do things, and the developer love it, the user love it.
Yeah, so Sui has been doing well in terms of volumes and all of that recently. I kind of want to take a step back and kind of talk about the formation of Sui as it is today. You raised a lot of money. I feel like I'm neglecting my duties as a reporter. I don't have the number in front of me, but it was a lot of money, even by crypto standards. And I'm curious, as somebody who's leading one of these firms that raised so much from so many large, VCs, how does that kind of, and I'm sure there's other founders in the audience, how does that kind of, impact your ability to continue executing? Like, was it difficult, I guess, during that bear market to kind of keep people engaged, keep people enthusiastic while prices were going down, but you, of course, had all of these investors that, were, I'm sure, breathing down your neck?
We didn't have an investor breathing on
Really?
neck, right? We fortunately had a lot of trust. The investor had a lot of trust in us, and we executed quite well. Yes, during the bear market, it's pretty rough, but we were able to capture a lot of attention from developer, from the user community, and that eventually recover. Sui ended up being the best performing, kind of token among the majors in 2024. Raising a lot of money doesn't equate to success. We know that. We're seeing the stories everywhere. Plenty of well-funded startup end up failing to deliver product.
And I figure it creates challenges, and that's kind of what I'm curious about as well.
Well, it allows us a lot of the flexibility to go about building our business in a very different way.
Sure.
Right. So a lot of things that differentiates us from everyone else is not just in the product and the technology that we build, but also the approach to go about, kind of go to market and attracting people, market our products and keep on building, right? Yeah. This is the thing. We now, this is just over 3 years since Mysten. We have delivered Sui, which is the best performing, new L1. Sure. We have delivered DeepBook. It's also done extremely well. And we are delivering Wars.
Wars is the storage protocol.
Basically the same team in roughly same, 3 years' time.
Sure.
I think in the 3 years' time, most other protocols that raise a lot of money haven't really delivered anywhere near as much value to the investor, to everyone else as we have.
I mean, going back to the whole "don't be evil, can't be evil" thing, a lot of the focus of your writing on that was around, just decentralization generally. And there were questions in Sui's early days around token unlocks and, centralized supply. And I'm curious, kind of, how do you frame to people the difference between your consensus mechanism, maybe to start there, and other proof of stake systems as far as concentrated supply is concerned? Does it have a different sort of model than in Ethereum, where a lot of centralized supply doesn't correlate or does correlate with?
So I think people are a little confused about what centralization means, right? Some people think it depends on how the how many nodes you have, right? How many validators you have, right? And we're seeing this happen on Ethereum too. A lot of concentration in a few pools, a few validators,
so
right? Yeah. Because ultimately it's about 2/3 majority of the staking power, right?
Sure.
So Sui's model is not totally unique on that, right? We'll delegate a proof of stake. So eventually there's a lot of concentration in the hands of the foundation, but the foundation delegates tokens to validator, and then we build and we make protocol changes. Then now about to drop the requirement to, the staking requirement to become a validator on Sui. So we increase the distribution further. And another thing is important to know about our token supply is we're the one of very, very few that's fixed supply.
Okay.
I don't have, most others have unlock as well as inflation.
Yeah.
And if you look at the other protocol that launched around the same time, it's 6 or 7% annual inflation. Yeah. In the early days of protocols, it's actually a mass amount of inflation on top of the unlocks. So I think there's a few things people are sort of kind of get mixed up.
I mean, one of the, while I have you here, like one of the questions too has been about lock tokens versus stake tokens. Sui is far from the only project to be a part of this conversation, but there is a general practice in the industry where tokens will be locked up for investors, but they'll still be available to stake, meaning that emissions from the protocol, fees and so on, still accrue to investors who are theoretically locked. And those fees, it can be a lot of money. So I'm kind of curious, while I have you here, How do you kind of think about that sort of a model? Is that, I mean, you launched before a lot of these more recent protocols, and we're all experimenting.
Yep.
How do you kind of think about that, with the benefit of retrospect?
So the most important thing, if you think about modeling, each of the L1 is sort of economy, right? Economy, then there's underlying currency, and the currency have inflation, right? You can view the unlock as inflationary force. Is this necessarily bad? No, because you're using that money, the activity. As long as the economic activity or the growth outstrip your inflation, you have a healthy growth economy. That's the key thing. We're able to grow faster than inflation. That doesn't create problems. So a lot of these fees go back to, say, for example, the validators, and some of them go to the investor, but they can use that money to then add to, kind of put it back into the community to help the economy grow faster as a result. So this is the outcome, right? We're able to grow very, very quickly in a very amount of time because all these economic designs come together.
I mean, speaking of the design, how do you guarantee that that money is put back into the
protocol? You don't guarantee
the ecosystem.
There's no such a thing as guaranteed.
Okay. How do you try to incentivize that sort of a structure rather than just dumping? That's the fear.
Well, I mean, by growth, right? If there's a growth, and investments will come in. It's simple as that. And where's the investment coming? And this is very, very similar to a lot of economic, real world economies like this, right? You have to make money and an opportunity to make even more money for that money to flow back.
So you need to set up that flywheel to incentivize people to recontribute to the ecosystem. Shifting gears a little bit, you of course, as I mentioned, worked at Facebook. You worked at DM, but it was also called Libra. So maybe we can talk a little bit about the other, elephant in the room, Libra in the room, which is that meme coin that was, backed by Javier Milei of Argentina. Everybody in this audience, I see some smiles, has heard about this, but if you haven't, it was a meme coin. It was endorsed by the Argentinian president, and it ended up crashing. There's a lot of, shenanigans going on with the person who launched that meme coin and so on, but it kind of put us in a weird place for the first day of the consensus, conference. And I'm curious to get your reflections as somebody who has a platform that, of course, like all of these other platforms, is used by meme coin builders. How do you feel? Like, what is your sentiment when it comes to these sorts of things?
Well, it's a platform. People will build whatever they want to build. It's permissionless. That's very important. But it's also about the community you build. Do we encourage some type of activity, or do you discourage certain kind of activities? Coming back to the investment question, if you apply more investing in certain types of activity because it gives you value, you increase your economic activity as a result, increase your growth, you're more incentivized to keep on plowing money back into that industry. And that's what we saw happen with certain other platforms, and that really hasn't happened on Sui, right? So, we do have a role to play here in shaping the economy and shaping what happens on our platform.
And how do you do that? Like, it's obvious, it's decentralized. Like, how do you create that better community?
Investments ultimately the encouragement.
So investment in what sense? Maybe I'm not understanding.
Well, in helping them to market certain kind of product, to help certain kind of product attracts more attention, to literally put money back into this, right? You probably have seen certain blockchain that have funds specifically allocated to memes. And again, memes are not necessarily bad because it's a wide range of different kind of meme coin. Some are very much community-based, and where people come together and celebrate their identity and being part of the community. That's fine. But we're seeing recently, unfortunately, there's some, I would say, more celebrity tokens that sort of are designed explicitly to attract attention because that notoriety of the person or identity behind it. And then, unfortunately, some of them end up extracting value. Right. And that value flow out of the ecosystem rather than going back into the economy. And that's bad. So there's a distinct, there's a very, very different, right? So it is hard, right? Let's not get let's not beat around the bush. Growing any economy, growing any ecosystem is extremely difficult. And what we're seeing is everybody's trying to learn and what works and what doesn't work, what is good and what not good. So there's going to continue to have, unfortunately, the downside of this permissionless, publishing platform. But hopefully, over time, we'll see a lot more good that come out of it.
Yeah.
Than bad.
Well, Evan, thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us. I think we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
This was great.
All right.
Thanks so much.